calling MCDD out of recess. Anything else you need to say about that? Okay. First up, we've got the trash rake contract award, Bill Owen.
Bill's online, I believe.
Great.
Can you hear me all?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. So as you know, we have a capital project to replace the current trash rakes at pump station number 4 out on Marine Drive. And we are in a position to order the actual equipment to be manufactured and delivered to our sites by August 8th. We need to order the equipment separately as opposed to having the construction contractor do it because of timing. We've had a couple of different estimates of how long it takes for lead times. It's been as much as 50 weeks. That's 50. But recently we've heard that it can be as short as 34 weeks. So we cannot wait for the construction contractor to get on contract for this project and then begin the order if we hope to install this next summer, which is the current plan. So we've negotiated the contract with terms with Lakeside Mirror, and we have a recommendation for a motion to approve and authorize the executive director to sign the contract with a maximum contract value of $950,000. Any questions?
Bill, can you explain the installation costs, or is that a separate issue?
It's a separate issue, Corky. So I was trying to explain that there's actually 2 contracts, one for the equipment and the second for the installation.
Thank you.
The installation contract you'll hear about, I hope, around March, April timeframe when the designs.
Other questions?
Jim, I want to just thank Bill for advancing this project in the CIP list. It's a really key place where we've had some risk to our operations team and other members of our staff. So by automating the system, we're creating an opportunity to have staff present there less, which should help. I will say, though, that Pump Station 4, if you haven't been out there, is pristine right now, and the area is clear. But we are hopeful that will remain that way. But if not, this is really not only making us more efficient, but also keeping our operations team safe. And that's a top priority for all of us here. So thank you for your consideration. And Bill, thanks for the extra work to try and make this project go more quickly.
Any other discussion? That I'll entertain a motion.
This is Darian. I will move to approve and authorize the executive director or their designee to sign a contract for the purchase of the trash rake system with a maximum contract value of $950,000.
And I'll second.
Do a roll call vote. Corky Collier,
Aye.
Darian Santer,
Aye.
Nikki Schultz votes aye. Motion passes.
Thank you all.
I assume we check eBay for a used one.
So Bill, you're up for the gate tower next again.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So as you know, we've had conversations as a board back in September and November of this year to talk about the drainage system, if you will, under the MCD SDSE cross levy. And it includes the gate tower on the west side, the drainage pipes underneath, and then the 2 flat bells on the east side, on the SDIC side. And per your direction, staff, thanks to Hong and Armand, have developed a resolution that indicates that MCD would accept ownership and future maintenance responsibilities of the gate tower and those 2 drainage pipes. Our intent was to have a conversation with SDIC prior to this resolution earlier this morning, but they were not able to meet in a quorum. So our intent still is to broach the topic with them for them to take ownership of the 2 flap valves only on their side of the cross levee. So the resolution is written as such. Hong, anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to add, to your point, Bill, the SDIC board, did not meet this morning. And so we don't have a proposal to them, nor their approval with respect to our proposal to them about retaining ownership of the flat valves, on the east side. So the board has a choice you can move forward with the adopted resolution and count on them voting to approve that later, or wait until after their board meeting, December 28th, to then take up this resolution. With that, we do have Tanny here as the president in the room to listen in, and I suppose you can ask him to take comments if you'd like, but I just wanted to make that clear.
Kenny, do you have a feeling whether this is gonna be a controversial proposal?
I will recommend for their own personal safety that they all vote for this. And frankly, I think this is a great resolution to something that's been going on for a long time, and I think it's needed.
Unless there's a dissent from the board, I would then just propose we continue moving forward today with our own motion.
The only question I guess I would have is if we go forward with this resolution without the SDIC part being settled unequivocally, does that potentially make there more work for staff if we have to go back and do this a different way, or is it kind of negligible?
We would, so if SDIC does not approve our proposal, then you would have on paper a resolution that only accepts responsibility for the 2 components, and then there's no resolution on the flap valves. And to the extent that there's work that needs to be done on it, that's something that we'll have to account for. I don't know if Lori could live with that, because this was part of a financial documentation need that was driving this as well. What we could do is maybe amend the proposed resolution verbally to say that you adopted subject to SDIC agreeing with our proposal for ownership of the flap valves on the east side. So we can verbally amend the resolution, and then we can draft up an amended resolution to that effect.
Corky has his hand up.
Yeah, it's just more on the flat valves. I think, it's easy to look at this and say, why in the world MCDD owns the whole structure except the flat valves? I understand staff's recommendation. It makes sense to me, but I want to make sure that SDIC agrees, SDIC does, that there's no reason for this to be a lingering, thorn in our side. Yeah.
I guess whether the MCDD board takes it up today or not, I think I'll look to Bill and maybe Lori to see if we could hold it off until January, until after we hear from SDIC, or those are the options.
I would just say, and I can't speak for the board, but I feel that I don't see any reason why the board would not accept this proposal.
I think being able to verbally amend it to say it's contingent upon.
Maybe it
Sure.
takes effect upon approval by SDIC or something like that. Yeah, 'cause clearly, if other board members have concerns, we'll have to address those. It would be similar work for staff either way if there's other concerns.
Okay, so the proposal would be then to approve this resolution with an amended language that it would take effect subject to SDIC approval of our proposal. Accept
Effect upon
responsibility.
approval by SDIC. That way the time element is done too, so it's efficient.
So Wendy, do you have draft that amended language?
You asked me to do that, type it in right now. Is that what you're asking?
I think we will, the staff's recommendation for
Unless-
MCDD to take ownership.
Do you have it without it written?
I think I could probably.
Yeah,
Right.
so I'll take a motion.
Okay, so, it's Darian, I approve resolution number 2022-12-01, accepting ownership and responsibility of the MCDD SDIC cross levy gate tower structure and associated facilities upon the SDIC, approval of taking ownership of the flap gate and of facility.
Great, sounds good.
And I'll second that.
Do a roll call vote, Corky Collier,
Aye.
Aaron Sanford,
Aye.
and Nikki Schultz votes aye. Motion passes contingent upon
Thank you.
SDIC.
Thank you all.
Amy, I think you're still on the hook for putting the restaurant bar on top of that at SCSC.
I think
You
I-
told me that that was important to you when I
I
first started.
Did say that. I,
Puts on top of our tower gate, so.
yeah.
In all seriousness, thank you, Bill, for figuring this out.
Yes.
Thanks to Jen for standing. I know you raised this early in my tenure here. Thanks for your help and
All right, I think our next agenda item, thank you, Bill, is the budget update and vote, Lori Baker.
That's me. Wendy's pulling up
I'm
the
sorry,
slide.
I have to find it again.
So I'll just, before we pull up the slide, this is really kind of the initiation of the budget season. Welcome to budget season. Hard to believe, we're not even halfway through the year and we're already looking at the budget again. We will be coming to you in January to look at some forecasts that we're developing for this current year. So some of the changes that you're seeing in the budget will feed into those forecasts, but we're taking a closer look at the numbers and we'll be able to give you a sense of where we think we're going to land for the year, which then helps us as we move into budget season with how much fund balance carry forward will we have to utilize towards operations next year. So that's the plan, but we did, in your package, you have seen a schedule and a memo discussing some issues that we found with the current 22-23 adopted budget. And so we wanted to walk you through those challenges and make sure that you were familiar with the things that we are recommending be updated and changed. And hopefully we'll find that document. There it is. Thank you, Wendy. So in the very first column on the schedule, which is really small, is the budget that you adopted in June for the fiscal year 22-23. In column 1, you will see a $1.3 million correction to beginning fund balance. The beginning fund balance in your adopted budget was understated by $1.3 million. As you can see on this schedule, the majority of that correction to beginning fund balance is related to funds that are restricted for capital spending. So that isn't extra money that we received for operations. It is related to money that has been set aside for capital spending. The ending fund balances are also adjusted in that column to allow for 2 months worth of operating costs in the operating reserve as designated by the board, and that has been in place for quite a few years, and correcting the ending capital reserve for funds previously reserved by the board that haven't been used yet for capital purchases. So that's column 1. In column 2, there's a correction for the JCA contribution for your district. So we talked about this at the JCA meeting this morning. There was a correction to the JCA adopted budget that actually gave us some funds back in our budget because there is a reduction to the contribution amount that we need to make to the JCA for the current year. In column 3, there are corrections that are moving the Oregon Business Development Grant from JCA to MCDD. So that was originally, that grant and spending was originally budgeted on JCA, but we did the grant application on the MCDD entity. So we're just moving the related revenue and expenditures related to that grant, if we are awarded that grant, into the correct entity. In column 4, we have some transfers in funding that are proposed to cover the unbudgeted expense related to the repairs to the levee resulting from the damage by the houseless individuals that were living on the levee. So we have an estimated cost of $200,000 for that work that is underway. And is it complete at this point, Jim, or are they still working on that?
The initial work is complete and we are having some trouble establishing grass because of the growing season. I don't know whether Bill is still on the line. And I will also say that Bill did have the initial meeting with the Port and Metro per direction from the board, and the next steps are on us. And we're going to be preparing an overall update for the board, probably for your next meeting. We'll have an update both on our access control plans and our efforts to work with the Port and Metro on some contributions to offset this expense.
So at this point, we're assuming that we don't have commitment for that extra funding. So we are making some adjustments to the budget to look at some projects that we won't be moving forward with this year to be able to offset those costs. If we were able to get that support and funding from our local partners, then obviously we'll be able to move forward with some of these other projects as well. But for now, we wanted to get the budget balanced again. And so Bill was able to help me identify some projects that could be deferred until the upcoming year. So you would see them, if we're not able to do those projects this year, you'll see them as a budget request coming through for next year. In column 5, there's a correction to reduce service contract revenue by $333,000. Stormwater fee revenues were overstated in the adopted budget by $94,000, and inter-district revenues were overstated by $239,000. So our calculations of those revenues in the budget process were not correct. So we are making that correction, and that one is one to really pay attention to because that does reduce the amount of operating funds available for us for the current year. In column 6, there are corrections related to assessments.
Lori, just a quick add. I think the flat billing is going to make the calculation of those revenues easier in the future. So I believe.
In part, and the challenge that we have is that if we do capital project work for the other districts, we still have to estimate the staffing portion of that because that shows up as revenue on MCDD. So we have made some revisions to the budget process and have been working with our project managers to talk about how best to share that information and be able to identify those costs on our other districts so that we can link those numbers to the revenue that we're projecting on MCDD. So this next one, there's a couple of adjustments in assessments. First, there was a $60,000 reduction to assessments because in the budget process, we just calculated assessments wrong. So we overstated those in the budget. The other piece here is really the not so happy news that we received about a week ago when we got the first round of reports from the county once the assessments and the property tax bills kind of went through the county's process. And what we've identified is an additional loss of revenue of $480,000 because MCDD is experiencing a much higher level of compression this year than we did last year. I have actually reached out to the county and asked them to please meet with us and start to talk about how that happened, what caused that very large increase in compression. And if you're not as familiar with this basically took almost every dollar of assessment increase that we budgeted for went to compression. So anything that we had anticipated in the budget that was going to be available for additional funding went away when the compression dollars were run through the system. So in reaching out to the county, we want to make sure, one, that their compression calculations are correct. They implemented a new system. We just want to confirm that there isn't maybe some trouble with the system in those calculations. Two, that we understand if they're correct, what's causing that issue. And three, how do we anticipate those, the compression impact next year? So are there new local option levies that we didn't anticipate? Are there things that we should be aware of so that we can, as best as we can, estimate what those compression impacts will be for our budget for the upcoming year? It's really hard to have made such a large increase in rate only to find out that it all kind of went away because we didn't have our hands around what was going to be the compression impact. So we're really going to work closely with the county and make sure that we have as good of a handle on that as we can, given the situation. And I will say that the county was very quick to respond to my request. They've already put 3 or 4 staff people onto this request, and they're really digging into it to try to figure out what's going on. So they've let me know that they'll be meeting with us as soon as they kind of have their hands around it and can talk about what happened. So
Quick color commentary. As challenging as the urban district revenue collection is, it won't be affected by compression. So
there you go.
we can
There's
look
the good
forward to
news.
that.
For sure. But what else can I say about that line? I will say this piece of the compression impact on the revenue, we were not able to balance the budget for this. So you will see that as a reduction to the fund balance that's available for operations. We were able to find some corrections that I'll talk about in a minute for the miscalculated revenues on the stormwater fee side and on the that intergovernmental revenue side, but it would have been over $1 million worth of cuts to be able to come up with everything that we needed to rebalance the budget. So we were not able to do that. I think we'll definitely be having more discussion about this when we come back in January and start to look at fund balance and start to look at maybe some of the other savings or reductions in costs that we've been able to identify in the forecast. But for us to be able to get this in front of you today, we wanted to just go ahead and move forward. But I did want to share that compression loss with you as well, because it really is a pretty large number. And so it's important for you to be aware of that. This line also has those corrections related to the assessment calculation decisions that we made at the last board meeting. So we talked about the fact that the assessments were not calculated correctly for Penn 2, and the board agreed to provide some funding support so that the Penn 2 district would not have to try to collect from the folks that were under assessed. And there's also some dollars in this line to cover the administrative costs related to those refunds that will be processing on Penn 2. We did get notification today that the county will have the individual property compression numbers for us next week, so we can start to move forward with calculating the corrections on the assessments for Penn 2 next week as well. Column 7 has an adjustment to increase the budget for installation costs for the pump station for trash rakes. The cost for this project, both for the equipment and for the installation, is anticipated to be a little bit higher than budget, in part due to, hopefully we've resolved the security issues, but if we continue to have security issues, that will impact the cost of installation. So we've included an estimate to increase the cost of that to be able to identify that for the board.
I think it's good for the board to know that we are not paying currently for armed security at Pump Station 4 because the situation has improved. So we're not bleeding those funds any longer for the time being.
Yes. In column 5 or column 8 is our expenditure reduction proposals that are really offsetting that stormwater fee and IGA revenue reduction that we talked about earlier. So we found about $400,000 worth of savings. $300,000 of that is not cuts in staffing, but it is open positions for the first half of the year. it's a little bit of a catch-22 because typically if you have open positions like that, you would use that to kind of give you some cushion as you're doing the fund balance roll forward into the new budget. So we're saying, you know, that spending is not going to happen. That's helping us to balance this year, but it certainly leaves us in a position where we won't be going into the new year with as much cushion as we would normally anticipate. So those aren't position reductions. Those are just positions that we haven't been able to fill in the first half of the year. And then we've got a couple of other reductions that we've looked at just on the professional services and consulting side. Some of the work that we anticipated in the budget that we just think is not going to happen this year. And so we've identified some reductions there to be able to balance out. Of course, we did all of that balancing before we heard about the compression. So we thought we were going to bring together a proposal that really brought you back to where you started with the budget. So sorry that we weren't able to get you fully balanced. So what I would point out is that our ending fund balance for the revised budget really leaves you with no dollars in undesignated. There's a little bit there, but it's not much to really think about. We've got the 2 months worth of operating reserves. So we are at least meeting our reserve requirements. And then we've got some dollars that are carry forward for the capital reserve. That is some borrowing money that has been set aside that will be funding ongoing capital projects, as well as some dollars that the board has decided to set aside in past years to be able to fund capital projects. So as we move into January, we can start to kind of look at those fund balances and see where we're at with our projections. But for today, we really wanted to get the budget cleaned up and get you to a good starting point and make sure that you were aware of kind of all of the corrections that we had identified, just as part of my kind of orientation and review of what we have with each of the districts. So I can take any questions at this point, but what we're asking for is a motion to approve those corrections to the budget.
Thank you, Lori. This looks like a little more work than usual.
Yes.
Really appreciate that. Corky, can you hear you?
Yeah. Laura, on the compression issue, that's particularly disturbing. And I don't recall this ever being an issue before. So I would very much appreciate a nice detailed report back of what the county said, the explanation. And you might want to consider also, calling up Casey. He may remember, have good knowledge of this in the past. Hasn't been a problem, or possibly even Reed Wagner, but Casey, I think, would be the better source there, and try and understand, have we encountered this in the past and I've just forgotten, or is this something new? And if so, why? What changed? So.
And I can respond to that. I actually spent a little bit of time while I was sitting at the soccer field over the weekend doing some historical analysis of the compression impact on our assessments. I know I'm kind of crazy. That's what I do on my free time. But what I did see, which is really interesting to me, is there's I went back to 2008, 2009, and I can, explain my reasoning there. I was really taking us back to the last recession period because I wanted to look at collectability too, and really see what we could anticipate with a potential kind of recession situation in the current year. But in about, don't quote me on this, but it was about 2013 that I saw a big increase in compression for just like 1 year. And then it kind of corrected itself. So when we meet with the county, we're definitely going to have those discussions. There was one kind of surprise year in the past where we had more compression than what Casey anticipated. I know that he had regular communication with the county on these issues and made sure that he really had his hands around what was to be expected with those compression calculations. So I will come back as soon as we've got the information from the county and kind of walk you through a full presentation. I know we in executive session had kind of talked about compression and how that what things could impact that. So I may bring that so that we can have that in public session as well, but we'll definitely go through that history and talk about kind of the issues that the county has identified and what we can anticipate for the upcoming year, because it does have a real significant impact on our kind of plans for operations and what we want to do with rate increases and that sort of thing. So I'll make sure that you all have the information that you need to feel informed about that and feel confident with the numbers that we're putting forth in the budget.
And my other comment is, thank you for highlighting all these mistakes. I know that's not fun to do, but I really appreciate it. You've done it really well. It made it easy for folks like me to understand. And it's very refreshing, and I very much appreciate the effort.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think it's important for y'all to know when we identify things that may not have been handled quite correctly. It's really important to me to be transparent and make sure
Right.
that you understand the information. I know that the ins and outs of debits and credits are really easy for me, and I try to make that easy for everybody else too. So. Any other questions?
Entertain a motion then.
Sure. With that in mind, I'll move that we approve the 2022-23 budget changes as noted in attachment 1.
I will second.
Roll call vote, Corky Collier,
Aye.
Darian Santer,
Aye.
Nikki Schultz votes aye, motion passes. Thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Lauren.
And that is the end of our agenda, unless there's any business that has not been otherwise addressed. And I will, I specifically need to say to adjourn. MCDD is adjourned. Great.
Now it's official. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thanks, folks.